right? Yes. So God help you if on a country road and somebody's lying dead in the middle of the road, or there's a pothole and you need to swerve out of the way, you've got to indicate first, or it's going to drive you back into the pothole. Okay, welcome back for some extra. We'll start with that then, but I do warn everybody, this is going to be a rant.
Yeah.
I had to.
Wait, just before you start it, sorry, let me just interrupt, because please pitch it for an audience like me, in that one that doesn't have any bells and whistles in a vehicle and doesn't understand any of the things that have happened in the automotive industry for the last 30 years.
And me, for that matter.
That start point.
Right. So just to set the context here, right? So yeah. I had to go back to Northern Ireland recently, unexpectedly. And normally I drive my own car when I'm going there, and it does take a couple of days to get there because I can't be bothered doing it in one go. I flew over to Belfast City Airport and I rented a car from a car rental place. And of course, these days they're all leased. And therefore, they're all brand spanking new. And the car that I was handed was a Kia Ceed. The first thing that happened was that the car hire company had parked the car with tail in, so that you couldn't get to the boot without moving the car out of the driving space, right? So I got into the car, I switched the engine on. I wanted to drive forward 10 feet at most in order to be able to put bags in the car. And I could not do that because I hadn't closed the door properly. I hadn't put my seatbelt on, right? Because without closing the door properly and without putting my seatbelt on, I wasn't allowed to disengage the handbrake. So I had to put my seatbelt on. I had to get in, put my seatbelt on, drive forward 10 feet, take my seatbelt off, get out of the car, put the bags in the car, right? That's the first thing. The next thing is, of course, being a modern car, this is connected. So the next thing was that because it's a rental car and therefore you can't set up a profile each time somebody rents a car, they don't allow you to do that. So that means every time you switch the engine on, all the buttons and knobs and everything all reset to factory defaults, right? Which means that lane assist is switched on and the bloody annoying warnings about speed limits are switched on, right? So if you do 2 miles an hour more than the speed limit, it's binging at you. And if you slow down and could do it again, it bings at you again. If you slow down and do it again, it bings at you again. And it bings at you if you try to change lanes if you're a very naughty boy and you don't use the indicator first, right? It'll bing at you. But worse than that, because it's electronic steering, you're steering, let's say you're moving from the outside lane back into the inside lane and you don't indicate, it will move you back into the outside lane again. What? Right? Yes. So God help you if on a country road and somebody's lying dead in the middle of the road, or there's a pothole and you need to swerve out of the way, you've got to indicate first, or it's going to drive you back into the pothole, right? That's the way it worked. So I tried to move this and the steering wheel's moving the other direction. It got worse. On the country roads, it decides it knows better how to drive around the corners than I do. I know these roads like the back of my hand. I travel this road regularly. I know the road like the back of my hand. I know what speed I need to be doing. I know which line I need to take to get around the corner without hitting the car that's coming in the other direction. And it is steering for me, right? And when it comes to the issue of who's responsible for the accident that Charles mentioned, I would like to know this, because this was the scariest, most unnerving thing I've ever experienced in a car. I've been out of control in cars and on motorcycles plenty of times in my time, and this was scarier than any of that, because I did not know that what I was going to do to correct the situation was going to do anything, right? So the next thing was, on the way up the motorway, naughty boy that I am, I decided I would test this lane assist by taking my hands off the steering wheel. And the next thing I knew, there's a message on the screen saying, put your hands back on the steering wheel. Right? I couldn't believe it. I could not believe it. It even knew where I had my hands on the steering wheel. Right? And then at some point I had to go and do a message, and it was 10-minute, 15-minute drive in each direction. And I drove to the place. I turned around to drive back again. And 2 or 3 minutes after I started driving back again, it said, consider taking a break. And flashed up a coffee cup on the screen. Consider taking a break.
No way.
Right? I could go on. It's insane. It's insane. Now, if you own the car, of course, you can set up a profile, which, of course, you need to give your email address and all kinds of personal information for. And you can switch all this stuff off and it will remember the settings and all this kind of stuff. But nonetheless, the degree of data collection is off the charts, and the degree of control that these cars already have over your ability to just drive is it's off the charts. It's unbelievable, and it's extremely unnerving. And I suspect, based on the state of the second-hand car market, and maybe Jeff Spies Cars can tell us more about this at some point, but I suspect, based on what I've seen of the state of the second-hand car market, lots and lots of people, if not everyone, is feeling the same. Nobody is buying new cars. Nobody is selling second-hand cars. They're holding on to what they can for as long as they can because they don't want to deal with this rubbish. That's what I think is going on. So anyway, that was my experience, and I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it.
Because one thing we spoke about, Mike, was insurance. On the data gathering side, it's very easy to foresee that insurance premiums will have introduced into the actuarial process data of your driving, not just driver hours and miles and stuff, but also your tendencies concerning speed, the line you take on the road, whether you do or don't indicate, and all of that kind of thing. So I think it's terrifically alarming that we are anywhere near this, and particularly given the segment I've just done on the fact that the regulation itself is utterly half-baked. And it's based on a total lie that there are successes in these areas where there absolutely aren't. And even if there are successes, they are, of course, completely qualified, or at least mitigated by the catastrophic failures involving death, and death where, like you say, the massive question of responsibility has not been satisfactorily resolved. It's the totally impractical idea that this is how we should all be getting around the place. And of course, the only thing that drops out of that is, well, it can only work if we're not all getting around the place. In actual fact, if only very few of us are going anywhere.
Right.
Smart cities.